there is a stigma around STIs. Even with perfect hygiene, people are still getting UTIs. Especially Black women have been subjected. They've been used, they've been studied, they've been cut open and experimented on without consent. Period pain is normal, but period pain that interferes with your daily life is not. What if the reason you haven't gotten answers isn't because your body is broken, but because the system was never built to listen to you? Welcome to G Chats. Hi guys, welcome back to G Chats with your host Gianna Jara in the G Spot. Today's episode is going to be a rant essentially about shame-based education and medical misogyny. I want to be fully transparent that normally when I come in with very educational videos, I have like notes prepared so that I can make sure I'm getting like all of my thoughts out, make sure I'm touching on all of the relevant and necessary items. Now for this video, I did not really prepare any notes or like have my thoughts really well thought out. What I did do right before this was essentially just write out talking points on like good notes. I just like wrote out things that I want to rant about and talk about. So I might miss things. I might talk too long on certain things, but this wasn't meant to be an organized video because I really want this to be like a rant, something where you're sitting down and just catching up with your girlfriend and we're just ranting about this because I'm not gonna lie, this is a type of conversation that literally me and my best friends would have. We would just like sit and go get ramen and this would be the conversation at the table. So I just wanted to leave it very like rant style and just very casual because I feel like a lot of the previous episodes have been very scientific. So I wanted to make like more of a casual episode. I kind of wanted to start off with some of the like shame-based education stuff because I think that that's like the foundation of how a lot of us grew up. So I want you guys to like just think about the first time that you learned about your vagina. When was that? What was the first time that you learned about your vagina? And then when you think of that first time that you learned about your vagina, I honestly would be willing to bet that it was either rooted in avoidance, embarrassment, or fear to some degree. And I think that this is very prevalent, especially because when we are young girls, that's when most of us like get our periods, and periods are rooted in avoidance, shame, embarrassment, and we see that like all the time. And then we have like another thing that's touched on when we're younger, when we're young girls, and that is sex ed. And sex ed is basically like fearing you to be afraid of sex because they don't want teen pregnancy. Obviously, we don't want to promote teen pregnancy, but the way that it's taught is less educational and more fear-based, shame-based. I think young girls at a really early age are kind of instilled in their head that their bodies or their worth is equated to how many people they sleep with, which isn't exactly, made the same towards men. This is something that largely affects women and the whole concept of body count and stuff like that. And then we have the whole conversation of STIs. And STIs are important to educate young girls and boys on. Like no matter what, STIs are important to learn about. But I think like a lot of it just really forces this space of fear. And there isn't this education on the vagina, your reproductive organs, your cervix, HPV. There really isn't a conversation about things that also matter. Like HPV is responsible for like 90% of cervical cancers. HPV is hardly talked about. You will have HPV mentioned to you at the doctor's office as a young girl when you're ready for your first dose of the HPV vaccine, which everyone should take. I'm a huge proponent of the HPV vaccine. I'm a huge proponent of all vaccines. I'm a scientist, so I'm team vaccines, but the HPV vaccine is one where I'm actually surprised by how many people aren't vaccinated with the HPV vaccine. And cervical cancer, anal cancer, throat cancer, rectal cancer, these are cancers that are caused by some strains of HPV that are incredibly preventable if you get vaccinated. So I just encourage everyone to get vaccinated, but that's not here nor there. The point of this is to emphasize how things like that aren't really talked about. Like, what is human papillomavirus? What are the strains? What's high risk? What's low risk? How does it impact the vagina, the cervix? How does your vaginal microbiome microbiome put you at less of a risk of contracting chlamydia, gonorrhea, HIV, syphilis, all these things. The vaginal microbiome plays a huge role, right? Now, if you have a healthy vaginal microbiome, it doesn't prevent you from catching these infections. That would be misinformation to spread. However, we do know that there's documented research that showcases how having a balanced vaginal microbiome reduces your risk of contracting these infections. None of that is taught in schools. Nobody, not a single young girl is taught that having a balanced vaginal microbiome is important to reducing the risk of infections, from STIs to bacterial vaginosis. Things like bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, UTIs, those aren't taught in sex ed either. I never, not even freshman health class, never learned about BV, yeast infections, UTIs. You can imagine when I had my first UTI, my head was like spiraling and thinking and freaking out because I didn't know what it was. Like in my head, these infections come from either being dirty or having too much sex. And neither was true for me. So I was horrified when I had my first UTI. I'm like, oh my God, how did this happen? What's going on? Am I dirty? Like I'm doing everything right. You go down this spiral of panic and you're just losing your mind wondering how the heck this happened. And things like PCOS, endometriosis, also not taught. So all of that's to say that a lot of it starts in like classrooms and even at home. When I'm talking about sex education, I'm not just putting all this pressure on just like teachers in elementary school and teachers in high school, because I understand that even they aren't really trained professionals to be able to give this education. I just think there needs to be systems in place so that trained professionals, gynecologists, OBGYNs, medical professionals, sex therapists, all these things, like people who are trained professionals who understand this could go in and make educational content for these young students that's age appropriate, that teaches them what they actually need to know about their bodies, because it really does start with what you are first taught. And instead, what we're first taught, either directly or subtly, is shame-based education. And there's a lot of language around clean, fresh, don't smell, hide it. And I know that you guys remember to some degree feminine washes and those commercials growing up, and hearing conversations about how the vagina needs to be odorless, and you go to the store and there's products that have fragrance in it. How many times when you were younger did you open up a pad and the pad smelled like baby powder? It had like a floral scent and it says like, ooh, nice natural fragrance. And it's just like kind of emphasized that the vagina has to smell good. It has to smell like a flower, smell like a baby powder, smell like perfume. And there's deodorants for down there, Summer's Eve and Vagisil. They have cornstarch powders and stuff, and odor block. And periods, then that kind of takes us down. I just mentioned pads, takes us down the world of periods, and it's framed as something that needs to be concealed. Think of growing up when you had to change your pad in high school, or for me, it was elementary school. I got my period in the 4th grade, and I remember being so embarrassed to like show my pad, or like if I had to go to my book bag and grab a pad, I was so afraid of somebody seeing my pad, whether it was my students or my teacher. I actually have a story from the 4th grade. I had my period when I was in 4th grade. I got my period very early. I was 10 years old. When I was in the 4th grade, I had a male teacher, and I remember, if you guys probably had the same thing where there were bathroom breaks, and I had to change my pad midday throughout class, and I asked my teacher like, hey, can I go and use the bathroom? And he was like, we had our bathroom break already for the morning, so no. And I was like, but I really need to go. And he was like, well, you should have went during the first bathroom break, because I was one of the students who didn't go. And I was like, well, I really need to go now. Like, I have to go now. Like, something, like, I gotta go. And he's just looking at me like, no. And I was like, mister, I'm on my period and I have to change my pad. Can I go to the bathroom? And I felt like I had to make him understand, like, I'm bleeding. I have to change my pad. I can't just leave this pad on. I'm bleeding heavy. And he was just like taken aback. He was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, yes, go to the bathroom. I remember though, like just being so afraid to tell him I was on my period. I was like shaking. I was so scared. And my mom actually laughed at me when I came home. She was like, don't be embarrassed. Like, tell him, who cares? I remember like even being in 6th grade. So I got my period early. I was in 4th grade when I got my period. And I remember being in 6th grade, and that was around the time that a lot of my friends started getting their periods. And I was almost like the mom of the the group. I was also older. I started school late. My parents started me and my brothers late. So I was always the oldest in my class. So I did, not only was I the oldest, like I was older than everyone by a year, but I had already just naturally went through puberty very early. I started going through puberty in second grade. So when I was in second grade, I started developing armpit hair. And I remember I didn't want to wear tank tops to school or anything. It was like the 3-finger rule. And I remember like my mom would put me in these cute tank tops and I was like, no, I don't want to wear them. And she was like, why? And eventually I ended up telling my mom that I was like super embarrassed to raise my hand at school because I had armpit hair and I was the only one. Like everybody else still has baby skin and baby faces. And I'm over here with armpit hair. Like I felt very manly and it was really embarrassing for me. And my mom was like amazing about it and really wanted to make sure I felt comfortable. She made sure that I wanted to groom it, not for anybody else, but for myself. And I was like, yes. And my mom ended up like waxing my underarms. Now, power to those of you who don't think you need to do it. I literally support anybody who makes decisions that are best for them. As long as the decision is for you, that's what matters. So if you don't want to shave your underarms, don't shave your underarms. I personally like wanted to as a young child. And then when I got older, I just prefer to not have underarm hair. So now I shave it. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I want to go like laser or whatever. I don't have that time. I just don't think it's worth lasering. Like it's armpit hair. I can shave it, whatever. I don't care that my armpits are a little dark. Like who cares? Hair grows there. I don't give a shit. I just literally shave it and that's it. The point is I started hitting puberty very fast. So by the time I was in 6th grade, I had boobs, I had armpit hair, I had pubic hair, I had my period. I was developed. Like I was the tallest one in my class. I hit a growth spurt. So funny enough, my growth spurt when I really got tall was, and I say really tall, guys, I'm 5'3", but I literally hit my growth spurt in 5th grade. And once I hit 5'3" in 5th grade, I have not grown since. I think maybe if I'm being like generous, maybe I grew an inch. I'm probably like 5'4" now, but every time it fluctuates. It's like one time I go to the doctor, I'm 5'4", then I'm 5'3 3/4. Whatever the point is I literally hit like 5'3" in the 5th grade next to like people who are 4 feet tall. I hate saying fully developed. I was a child, but you get the point is that I really went through puberty and I was more developed than my classmates. And it was really awkward, because I felt like nothing fit me. I felt very insecure about my body, like everything from my height to my boobs to my armpits. Like I just had so much insecurity going through puberty, acne, blackheads, like going through that. I was just so insecure about my body. And now in hindsight, I wish I could go back. And that's why I say my mom did a phenomenal job, but I do wish I could go back and like have a conversation with myself. My mom is someone who immigrated from the Middle East. So even though she was like great about a lot of it, she still is traditional and sometimes was like, yeah, like when I was insecure about my leg hair, it was like, oh, well, shave it, get rid of it. Yeah, you can't look manly, you know? And it obviously now my mom has me who's went down this field and I feel like I've done a lot of educating to my mom. She's my best friend. I wish I could go back in time and really talk to my younger self and kind of just emphasize that this is normal. Like having leg hair, armpit hair, your boobs growing and your boobs being like pointy when you're really young, like all of that is normal. Like it's okay. It's not embarrassing. You're not ugly. Having blackheads, like all of that is normal. I was just so self-conscious about a lot of it. And then a lot of my friends, I brought this up because a lot of my friends started getting their periods in 6th grade. And I remember when they got their periods, it was like, Gianna, what do I do? I don't know how to tell my mom. I don't know how to talk to my mom. My mom was like an open door for me and I could speak to her about my period. But a lot of my friends didn't know how to communicate with their parents. A lot of them were just like, how do I tell my dad? How do I tell my mom? What do I do? And that was very scary for them. And I felt like from a young age, I was like a mom and I was very much, everyone said, you're the mom of the group. Even as early as 6th grade, I would tell them like, it's okay. This is normal. Like, don't worry about it. So I feel like I grasped very early on that this is okay. This is normal, having your period, having boobs, pubic hair, all of that. Like I grasped that very early on. However, I still had my own insecurities. There was still shame-based education that was taught to me that I kind of had to break out of. Even in college, like I got my first UTI and I spiraled. I was like, maybe I just need Summer's Eve because I'm dirty and I've been using Dove soap and maybe that's not enough because it's not a feminine wash. And then I started buying feminine wipes and deodorant sprays and stuff like like that. And I didn't need any of that, but I didn't know. Like, I genuinely didn't know. And that's because that leads me to this point, is that the vagina is taught as a problem, right? And we see this all the time. There's so much shame around the vagina. It starts with the period, right? Period blood is seen as like this disgusting, deadly thing. Your vagina is seen as something from the beginning of time that needs extra cleaning because it's difficult and nasty. Like, the vagina is just framed as a problem organ. It's framed as something that easily goes wrong. Think of how many people you speak to and they're like, oh my God, my vagina is so sensitive. Like, everything bothers it. And that's not to dismiss that truth. Like, that is true. A lot of people's vaginas are sensitive, but I think that a lot of the sensitivity that exists with so many people's genitals isn't because something's wrong with their genitals or that they're just broken or that they're unlucky. I think it is because we have framed the vagina as a problem organ and nobody has really taught women how to take care of their vagina. And so at this point, it goes years on of not taking care of your vagina properly, that your vagina appears to you as a problem organ that is so sensitive to everything. Like, I've read comments where people are like, I can't even drink a can of soda without my vagina giving me a yeast infection. And to me, when I see that as a biomedical engineer who studies female reproductive health and understands the science, I'm thinking, is something wrong with your blood sugar? Are you maybe pre-diabetic? Do we need to look into your A1C? Is there gut issues? Because fungus, yeast, can grow and thrive in the gut, which can reseed into the vagina. And a lot of people with recurring yeast infections have gut issues along with blood sugar issues. That's where my mind starts going off. But to someone else, they're like, no, just everything sets my vagina into a yeast infection. And I'm like raising that question of, well, no, you're not just like someone who's insanely sensitive or like your vagina's broken, like you happen to have a broken vagina. No, it doesn't work like that. Like, let's get to the root cause. Like, let's kind of think of what else could be connected to this yeast infection and to the sugar that's triggering your yeast infection. And that's something that's like not talked about, and no one teaches people about that. And the reason then is like there's this space of medical misogyny, or just misogyny in general in medical education. Because again, the vaginal microbiome is barely talked about. I didn't learn about the vaginal microbiome until I was in college and was a biomedical engineer studying and was in independent study and started researching the vaginal microbiome. Nobody talks about bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, UTIs. I literally didn't learn about any of this. Chlamydia, and how like leaving these things untreated can lead to pelvic inflammatory disease, endometritis. Like, nobody talks to you about this, and women are often told these concepts or this like language of this is common. Like, this happens. Even me, when I got my first UTI, and it was, oh, once you get one UTI, you'll just keep getting them. This happens to everyone. Everyone gets yeast infections. Everyone gets UTIs. Everyone gets BV. Once you get one, you'll just keep getting them. You'll grow out of them. That is literally language that I was told in the medical setting, and even just like online when I read all these forums. It's like, don't worry, everyone gets these. And while yes, it's true, because on the flip side, you could say like, there's other people who are judging others for getting them so frequent. So we shouldn't judge people for getting them so frequently. However, we shouldn't just be normalizing and saying everybody gets these. What are we talking about? What do you mean everybody gets these? Why is everyone getting a UTI? Why is it that once you get one UTI, it just keeps coming back? Why is it that you get a yeast infection every single time you take antibiotics for a UTI? It's funny because I was just talking with my nail tech and we had a whole conversation. She was literally saying like, every time I have a UTI, I take the antibiotics and then I get a yeast infection. And I'm like, so does like 90% of people, because nobody is explaining to us why antibiotics trigger a yeast infection. So many people will take antibiotics for strep throat and get a yeast infection after. But guess what? They walk out of the doctor's office not even knowing that they're about to have a yeast infection until it happens for the first time. And then you feel like you are prone to a yeast infection all the time after that because you never reestablished good bacteria back in the vaginal microbiome. Now you're in this loop, this endless cycle of infection after infection, whether it's a UTI and then it's a yeast infection, you treat the yeast infection, and then it's bacterial vaginosis, and you take antibiotics for bacterial vaginosis, then you get a yeast infection again, and then you treat the yeast infection. Guess what? Now it's a month later, you're on your period, you get a UTI. Like, do you know how many people experience that Like, it's insane. It's so crazy to me. And what ends up happening with all of this, starting from being a young girl, and then these young girls grow into adulthood and become adults, we have a bunch of adults with female reproductive organs who end up being hyper aware but severely undereducated. Like, the way that that is so opposite of each other is insane, where someone can be so hyper aware of their genitals and their organs but be so undereducated at the same time is so crazy to me that it exists. And it existed within my own body as well. We will be so hyper aware of odor, so hyper aware of the appearance of our vagina, so hyper aware. Like, I still see bleaching products for the butthole and the vagina. Why are we bleaching our buttholes? Why are we bleaching the vagina? I need to know, why are we bleaching our organs? It is okay for them to be darker. It is okay for your butthole to be brown. It's okay for your vagina to be brown. It doesn't have to be white or pink. We're just so hyper aware of the look. Like, we'll see one thing on the internet of like somebody will be like clowning someone for having a brown butthole, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, everyone, we need to bleach or lighten our butthole. Do you know the amount of times I see on TikTok Shop kojic acid soaps being sold to cleanse down there to brighten up the butthole? I'm like, what are we doing? This is literally shame-based marketing. This is shame-based education. I say education loosely because it's not educating anybody, but it is shame-based marketing, because we are trying to instill and ingrain, like, you don't know who's on TikTok. Young girls scroll on TikTok, 14, 15. You might think like, okay, high schoolers, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, that's young. They're impressionable. Even me, I was 19, 20 years old getting my first UTI. I was impressionable. I was searching on YouTube and watching all these videos of like how to treat a UTI, like why did I get a UTI and all of this, and then fearing that I was going to get a yeast infection after and all that. Girls are impressionable, especially like minors and even young adulthood. Like, we are impressionable. And so you get on the internet and you see these things of like, the vagina needs to be odorless, or better yet, needs to smell like flowers. The vagina needs to be hairless. The vagina needs to be bright and white and pink. The vagina needs to taste like a fruit salad. And this is the rhetoric that's built, and infection free and all of that. And now we're all so hyper aware but severely undereducated and no true science about our vaginas. That to me is so crazy. It is so crazy. It's exactly why I do what I do, and I want to dismantle this system and dismantle the rhetoric around the vagina, because that's what people are hyper aware of and believe in for so long. And we actually see this. It's crazy because this all plays into teaching young girls about their vagina for the desirability of men. Everything that I said, a lot of it pertains to sex, right? Being odorless or smelling good for a man, making sure that your vagina is hairless for a man, making sure that your vagina tastes like a fruit salad for a man. All of that is taught. Like, even the color of your butthole has been taught or educated around, like, oh yeah, you need to have a brighter butthole because your man is going to look at it and think it looks like doo-doo. Like, what? If a man looks at your butthole and thinks it looks like shit, then I need him to get some glasses or contacts and go look at his shit in a toilet and see if your asshole looks anything like the shit in the toilet. Because I promise you, it probably doesn't. It's insane to me. Like, that's the rhetoric of, what are we afraid of? That your butthole looks like poop? Like, because it's skin, and skin has hyperpigmentation. Your butthole's allowed to have hyperpigmentation, I promise. So is your vagina. Like, it's the same with like the vagina having different colors, different shapes. You know how many people are insecure about their labia minoras? Like, I've seen people who are like, I need to get a labiaplasty and need to get like my labia fixed because it looks nasty. It's because society has like trained us on like what a vagina. And honestly, if I'm being really honest, people infantilize the vagina. Like, there's been way too much rhetoric, especially honestly with what's happening in today's world, or what's coming out with like the files coming out. And like, we're learning a lot about like very disturbing content, especially with like CP, and learning a lot about like how scary and disgusting this world is. I think that there's infantilization of the vagina. I would take it that far, that I think the vagina is infantilized, and a lot of people don't realize that what they're trained in their heads that the vagina needs to look like is what a child's vagina would look like the hairless, the labias being small and petite, the vagina being small and petite, the color and everything. Like, I think people don't realize that a lot of this rhetoric has been pushed by sick ass men who infantilize women's bodies and infantilize the idea of the vagina looking very young. You're a grown woman. It is okay after birth for your labia to look different. It is okay for there to be discoloration of your vagina. It is okay for there to be hair on your vagina. It is okay for your vagina to have some odor. It is okay for your vagina to have discharge. It is okay. You sweat. It secretes mucus. There's a mucosal barrier inside in your vagina. It is okay for discharge to exist. It is okay to bleed. It is okay to have hair. Like, all of this is normal. If someone is like in your head making you feel like this isn't okay or this is something you need to be embarrassed by or disgusted by, red flag. It is very strange to me. Shame is used as a clinical tool a lot. That's another piece of the puzzle here, is that a lot of it is like men in society just like not understanding the women's body or women's bodies. But we also see shame as a clinical tool as well, because women also delay care because they're embarrassed. So if something is off, I'm always a big proponent of understanding your normal, right? I just said that discharge is normal, but understanding what your normal is. If things smell foul, you should see a doctor. There are so many women who literally won't go to the doctor because they are so afraid of like their gynecologist being absolutely disgusted by their vaginas, to which I'm like, anyone in the medical field, first of all, I know that there are physicians who have made women feel horrible. I actually reacted last season to Reddit stories of like medical stories, insane stories of women sharing like just like trauma from the doctor's office and things that they experienced, whether that's shame, medical misogyny, neglect. Like, we did a reaction video to it. It was absolutely insane. I remember when I did that video, like, I was just like obviously super critical of the medical professionals, but I also prefaced that like those are bad doctors, and I hate then that puts a sour taste in so many people's mouth of gynecologists and OBGYNs, because there are some great gynos and some great obstetrics that I've like literally spoken to. I think it's really important to understand that even if you had a bad experience, if something is wrong or alarming, like, I really do urge people to go to the doctor. And I know it's better said than done. That's not to dismiss any past experiences, but understanding your normal is really important. And anything that deviates from your normal is really important to get checked out, because again, like, when you leave something like BV, for example, untreated, that can turn into pelvic inflammatory disease, endometriitis, which can cause fertility complications, which can cause very, very intense pain and pressure in the pelvic region. So there's some serious like consequences to leaving these infections untreated. And it's really important to seek medical guidance when you do think that something is wrong. But a lot of people delay care because they're embarrassed, or they don't ask questions because they feel gross. And doctors simultaneously rush, dismiss, or avoid deeper explanations. And shame keeps patients quiet, compliant, and non-confrontational. And so we see a lot of people who just like will go on for a really long time and not even know that something's wrong, or say like, I thought something was wrong, but I ignored it. I was one of those people, actually, when I had my first UTI, I didn't really know what it was because no one told me what a UTI was. And I was like, no, I'm on my period. It must be from my period. So I actually ignored my urinary tract infection symptoms, and I ignored it for about 3 days, and then I was hospitalized because the pain got so bad and I started having a fever of like 101. So it really like highlights just how much we feel ashamed of our bodies. I was just so scared. I'm like, this is so embarrassing. Like, what am I going to tell a doctor? Like, it burns when I pee. Like, that's so embarrassing. And it's like, why is that embarrassing? That's not embarrassing at all, like in the slightest. At the time, it's just something I wasn't thinking about. We kind of see again like this loop, this problem loop, because we maybe don't go to the doctor as soon as we should because we feel embarrassed, and then like we avoid the treatment that we need, and then end up with infections that persist and can cause longer problems. And then what we see on the other hand is the hygiene industry feeding off of this is literally entirely built on odor insecurity and freshness anxiety. There's marketing that reinforces you shouldn't smell, you need to cleanse more, and products that disrupt your pH, products that disrupt your microbiome, and products that worsen the issue long term. And then there's the cycle of insecurity, right? We feel embarrassed of odor or anything of that nature. And so we reach for a product at the store shelves because we don't want to go to the doctor. We're too embarrassed to. And we think that Vagisil or Summer's Eve is going to work because it balances the vaginal pH. We think douching or taking an apple cider vinegar bath is going to do the trick. And these products cause more imbalances. That you have an imbalance in the vaginal microbiome, the more odor you have, the more discharge you might have, because these infections can get worse. And these products put you at an increased risk of getting other infections, and then there's more insecurity. You're even more insecure and you're having more symptoms. So then you go and get the anti-itch creams, the anti-itch wipes, and nothing's working. But then you feel like you're doing everything right and nothing's working. And now you feel like you're broken. You feel like your body has failed you. You feel like the vagina is so complicated. You feel like everything is more complicated now. And then there's this confusion over time of like what's normal and what's abnormal, because women are not taught their baseline. So everything feels like a problem. Everything like discharge, ovulation fluid, cycle related odor shifts. It leads to overtreatment, anxiety, and misdiagnosis. Like I've seen so many people talk about the concept of using boric acid every single time that they have sex or every single time they finish their period. I'm like, why? And it's like, oh, we have to freshen up because like I have a little bit of an odor after my period. And I'm like, it's normal. Like you just shedded your entire uterine lining. That is more alkaline. It is okay for there to be like a shift in the pH, which can have a slight shift in the odor. Like it is okay if like your period is a little strong in odor. Now, as long as it's not like foul, if it subsides after a week, that's fine, but give your body some time to like adjust. You don't need to like clean your vagina after you have a period. You don't need to clean your vagina after sex. Like it is okay to have a little bit of odor or even discharge or things like that. Like some people will be like, yeah, I have sex. And even if they use a condom, like they're like, there's just like fluid leaking out. And I'm like, yeah, it's sexual fluid, and sexual fluid can be higher on the pH scale than your vagina. So you might have a little bit of burning, but don't reach for a douche. You don't need to douche your vagina and pickle it after intimacy. When infections are prevalent, what we do kind of see a lot of times is the other side of the conversation, the extreme of gynecologists saying, yes, all of these products on the store shelves absolutely suck. So you know what the solution is? Just use water. And so many people are like, wait a second, I'm confused and I feel very unsupported because water doesn't feel clean. Water doesn't feel like it actually gets rid of the sweat, the discharge, the blood. I don't feel like I'm clean just using water. And there's these two extremes. We either see no guidance at all of just use water, but that just use water rhetoric is coming from a place where medical professionals are all agreeing that what does exist is the over cleansing and the really crappy products that make things worse. We see this narrative of rejection, right? Where both sides, the feminine hygiene space rejects a lot of science and the scientific space rejects a lot of the over-the-counter health and wellness, feminine hygiene products. It's not that the scientific space is necessarily wrong. I just think that when it comes to something as delicate as the vagina, which a lot of gynecologists can respect and acknowledge, less is more in their eyes. So they're like, just use water. Just use water because you're more likely to have an infection from these fancy deodorizing washes versus just using water. Unfortunately, leaves women caught in the middle. Like who's caught in the middle? Who suffers in the end? Women. And it's unfortunate. And it leads into sexuality and desirability because this impacts women a lot when it comes to sex, because now they're like, well, how do I clean or freshen up after sex? How do I take care of myself so that I don't smell, so that I don't have hair? I want to make sure that I like am shaving, but like what products are right for shaving and what makes my vagina aesthetically pleasing? And then it's really this idea of male-centered desirability. That's ultimately what ends up happening. And the language itself is incredibly misogynistic. That leads me to a whole other point that I'm looking at on my iPad. feminine hygiene implies that women are inherently unclean. Have you ever walked into the store and saw a male hygiene aisle? No. I will answer the question for you. No. Nobody's seen a male hygiene aisle. There's only a feminine hygiene aisle because society has trained young girls and women to believe that the female genitalia is inherently unclean. We don't say penile hygiene industry, and then we have euphemisms instead of real words like down there and flower exist because people are too afraid to say the word vagina out in public. Actually, guys, I want to tell a story. When I pitched for my business for With Meraki Co., when I pitched and I was talking about the probiotics for vaginal health and everything, it's so funny how I got on a local radio and I was saying the word vagina. And as I was like on the radio and talking about the vagina, I was actually told by the host that I couldn't say the word vagina and that we would have to like restart because the word vagina was seen as like a derogatory word, like that can't be on air. And so I was like, what do I say? And instead I said female reproductive organs, but that could be anything. That could be the uterus, the ovaries, whatever. I couldn't say the word vagina. And you know, it's a complicated place to be in because I hate the word vagina because the word vagina comes from a Latin root word that means a sword's sheath. And essentially the sheath is the pocket that you put the sword in. And so like our vagina has been reduced to just like a holder, the sheath that a sword belongs in, so a pocket for the sword. So essentially, the vagina is a pocket for the penis. That's what the vagina has been reduced to, and that's where the word vagina comes from. And a lot of people are like, let's give it a new name. I've made numerous videos about this on social media. They've went viral, millions of views, and people are like, let's give it a new name. And people say flower and say like yoni and things like that. I don't know. I'm in like a crossfire with that because I feel like euphemisms like flower really make it seem like we are afraid to say our body parts because our body part is seen as a derogatory term. But at the same time, I also agree that like vagina is just like a shitty word to be used and a crappy word that has been used to describe the organ. This leads me to the next point is like this basically is avoidance of anatomical language, which equals a lack of ownership. And I think that this extends deep into dismissal of women's pain eventually because we've kind of just created this narrative of a lack of ownership within our own bodies, not understanding our own bodies better, and shame-based education. So now we're in a place where pain during sex has become normalized, minimized, and we have conditions like endometriosis, vulvodynia, and things like that that take literally decades to get diagnosed, and women are labeled as anxious, dramatic, and overreacting. We've seen this from the beginning of time with female hysteria. If you were depressed or if you were anxious, you were just labeled with female hysteria, and they blamed your uterus for causing these symptoms. And women were treated with leeches on the abdomen, tranquilizers. Like, it was insane. So dismissal of women's pain is so prevalent because of these things, from the language that we use to name the organs all the way to how our body is taught to us, to education, shame-based education, literally the feminine hygiene aisle, the list goes on, and there's just a lack of system-based thinking. Again, I talk a lot on my page about how your hormones are connected to your gut, which is connected to your vagina and all of that, and nobody is taught this information. And then there's also like cultural contradictions, because in culture we see like be sexy but not sexual. We see things like be clean but don't talk about how, take care of yourself but don't ask questions. And so we end up seeing that the body is both hypersexualized and medically neglected. And you know who's caught in the middle of that? None other than women. It's just a repeated thing, and it doesn't help because when you get on the internet to try to seek some advice, it's the internet versus medicine, and there's a system divide where women turn to TikTok, Reddit forums, and so many different websites because doctors aren't answering their questions, but then misinformation spreads, and the root issue is that the education gap has created this environment. That's the truth. That's why I started with the education, because that is the foundation of this entire conversation, and there's this emotional impact because chronic infections can impact confidence, relationships, mental health, and women again feel broken, embarrassed, isolated, and no one talks about that side. Your body is not failing you. You were just undereducated, and I want people to know that because there's nothing you should feel embarrassed by. And I hope that like my platform creates a safe enough space that we can talk about these things, because symptoms are signals. They are not flaws. You shouldn't feel embarrassed if you have odor. That's a symptom of a deeper issue that you need to get checked out. But women's health absolutely needs better research, better education, and systems based thinking, because you deserve to understand your body better and not just manage it. And I didn't touch on this too much in the video, but I also should have mentioned how like female reproductive health research is incredibly underfunded and understudied. Like there's such little amount of funding that goes into understanding female reproductive organs, everything in female reproductive conditions, from the vaginal microbiome to endometriosis to PCOS. So there's not enough education in general on female reproductive health. And I think that that plays a role too, because that's why misinformation is so easy to spread, because people don't even know what they're talking about. They don't even understand their bodies better. And misinformation is just rampant, especially nowadays. So I just think it's like super important to understand your body better and find like resources that actually educate you about your body and isn't shaming you, resources that help you understand how you can take care of your body for you and not take care of your body for a man's desirability. Like we don't want male-centered female anatomy education or care in 2026. I don't want to see it anymore. So that is it, guys. I know that this was a long episode. It's been much longer than some of my previous episodes, and I feel like I was all over the place, like ranting. But if you love this type of episode and this type of content, make sure that you let me know down below in the comments. I'll do more rants in the future. Just let me know what you want me to rant about. Yeah, I just wanted to make this totally informal and kind of just have some talking points to kind of rant to you guys, because I'm just sick of what I'm seeing, especially in this political climate. It's very unfortunate. I absolutely hate it. Misinformation is rampant. It's sad because a lot of people will always, I hate saying it's not that serious. It's not that serious. It's always that serious. Shame-based education is always that serious. Our reproductive organs being named after male anatomists is always that serious to talk about. The lack of research funding is always that serious. Male-centered desirability is always that serious. The vagina being infantilized is always that serious. I don't know what else I could say. It's always that serious. I don't care what you call me. And I like bothering people on the internet who feel like I'm too woke. Oh, well, cry about it. I don't care. Like, it has to be said. It has to be talked about. And I'm grateful that I've been able to build a community where people feel safe to learn about their bodies, rooted in science and not rooted for the desirability of men, or rooted in medical misogyny or misogyny in the feminine hygiene and wellness space. I love you guys so, so much. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.